What's up guys, I'm BTC. Blizzard is planning a rework of Torbjorn, a character that's had quite a few problems ever since the game came out. So let's take a look at what they can do. You can say a lot of things about the Torbjorn character, but popular is definitely not one that has ever been used. Torbjorn has one of the lowest pick rates of any of the characters in the game, and this isn't simply because of a shift in the meta. In fact, Torbjorn has never ever been even anywhere close to being in the meta. He has always consistently had one of the lowest pick rates throughout the entire life of the game. And I'm not just talking about his tournament pick rate either. This is across all platforms, PC, Xbox, PlayStation 4, and most of the ranks. Torbjorn is always at the bottom. And even being the second least used character in the entire Overwatch League, with an abysmal 0.14% pick rate, there are some who will still claim the character is overpowered. So how can this be true? Clearly, if the character was overpowered, then the pros would be using him all the time, but they're not. In fact, they never use him. This brings up a really good point that I want to quickly talk about before we get into the actual rework stuff. Torbjorn's main ability is his turret, and it functions quite differently than any of the other abilities in the game, in that you really have no control over what it does. The turret is just going to kind of do its own thing, and it doesn't matter if you're a bronze player or someone in the top 500 or the Overwatch League. The turret is always going to do the exact same thing. It has a certain amount of health, it doesn't move at all, it has a certain delay in its targeting of enemy players, and it will always deal the same damage all the time with the same accuracy. It never changes. Compare that to, let's say, Roadhog's Hook or Reinhardt's Fire Strike. While they don't change depending on what rank you are, the player is still able to control a lot more of that ability. They get to choose when and how to use it. They also have to aim the ability themselves, so the better the player, the more effective that ability can be. This is a graph that I put together that kind of shows a general idea of the player skill throughout the ranks. Now let's put a Torbjorn turret on there. Now, the turret, like I said, is going to have the same strength regardless of what rank the player is that's using it. So that means there's only a certain level of effectiveness that this turret can have, and that's represented by that white line that goes across the screen. The higher you are above that white line, the less effective the turret can be. The further below you are that line, the more effective the turret can be. This significant difference in mechanical skill, accuracy, game sense, all that sort of stuff means that a lower rank player is going to have a lot more difficulty dealing with it than a higher rank player who generally consider the Torbjorn turret to be barely anything more than a nuisance. Now, Blizzard could certainly just buff the turret up to the point where it would be regularly effective against a GM player, but if they did that, it would be unbelievably overpowered for the lower bracket players. It would become an absolute mandatory 100% pick for both teams in every single match. Clearly, that's not a good idea for a multitude of reasons. Another thing that we need to look at, though, is the player reliance on the hero, Torbjorn himself, versus the turret. So this is another chart that I put together. It's not exact, it's just to give you guys kind of a general idea again. At the lower ranks, players rely significantly more on the turret to be able to deal their damage and to do the things that they need to do. As you move up in the ranks, however, that kind of shifts away from the turret back towards the character Torbjorn himself. And once you get into the really high brackets, the players are more dealing the damage themselves than they are trying to rely on the turret to do it for them. And the reason for this is what I mentioned earlier, where the turret strength does not change regardless of the player that's using it. So the higher ranked players need to rely on it less, and the lower ranked players need to rely on it more. A better situation is where all the ranks looked a little more like this, where they mostly use the character itself to deal the damage and do the things they need to do, and the turret is considered more of just kind of a disposable extra damage. So now you should fully understand why the character is problematic and it needs a rework. Now we're gonna get into the how it needs to be reworked. Right now, Blizzard has way too much emphasis on the turret and not enough on the character itself, and that needs to be completely flipped. The character Torbjorn needs to be the most reliable source of damage for players of all ranks, and the turret needs to just be something extra that he can use whenever it's available. I'm going to use an example from another game, Team Fortress 2. Now, in case you didn't know, there's a character in that game called the Engineer, and Torbjorn was heavily inspired by the Engineer. They both have a lot of similar abilities. The Engineer can build the turret, he then has to repair it and upgrade it, and all that sort of stuff. Now, one of the things that you can do in Team Fortress 2 is equip alternative weapon sets. This allows you to change a lot of different aspects about your character. Now, the Engineer has something called the Gunslinger. And what this does is it completely removes the Engineer's ability to make normal turrets. Instead, he makes these little mini-sentries that he just throws wherever. These mini-sentries will auto-build themselves extremely fast. However, they cannot be upgraded and they cannot be repaired. It's just disposable extra damage. Now, I'm not suggesting that Blizzard allow us to pick different equipment sets. That's just a whole different kind of problem, and I don't think it would be good in Overwatch. What should be done, however, is the Torbjorn turrets should be made to function more like the mini-sentries than the standard turret design. This means that the turret itself would become less powerful, but as a result, it means that Blizzard could then buff Torbjorn himself. They could change other parts of his kit, his damage, his health, all that sort of stuff, make the character more powerful and the turret a little weaker, and then just make it that disposable extra damage that I mentioned before. This means that Torbjorn wouldn't be able to upgrade the turrets or repair them. He would just kind of throw it somewhere, let it do its thing, and that's it. If it gets destroyed, then he just makes another one. So there's a couple of different things that you can do with the turret to still have it kind of be a little bit special, right? Now, it would start as the first rank of the turret, and then maybe after a certain number of eliminations, it would kind of upgrade itself automatically. I'm thinking specifically of one of Torbjorn's highlight intros, where it kind of shows him going through the life of the turret as it improves on its own. So the turret could go from level 1 to level 2 after a certain number of eliminations, or after a certain time limit. And because it's robotic, it could have some sort of automatic self-repair. Now, it wouldn't be anything drastic, it would be a very slow, over time self-repair that just makes the turret last a little bit longer if nobody's messing with it. And another cool thing that they could do is make it so that Torbjorn could throw the turret wherever he wanted to. Back in the early alpha, Torbjorn had an ability that had a claw hook on it. He could throw it against the wall and it would grapple to any of the enemies that went by and kind of hold them in place. They could bring back that same kind of functionality just with the turret. So you could throw it at a wall or a ceiling or wherever, and that's where the turret would be. It would be significantly more effective when you don't have to just have the turret in the same exact locations all the time. And as far as putting the turret in certain weird places where it's hard to see, remember, the turret has to actually have a line of sight to you. It has to see you in order to attack, and if it can see you, then you can see it, and you can attack it as well. So once the turret has been made into this more disposable thing, where it's treated more like a Junkrat trap or a Symmetra turret, then you can start buffing the character itself and doing all kinds of things. So there you have it, guys. Those are the main reasons why the character needs a rework. And what I think would be the best possible solution, again, is to take emphasis away from the turret, place it more onto the character, And that way, players at the higher brackets can be much more effective with the character, and players at the lower brackets don't seem to have to always rely on the turret to deal all their damage for them. What kind of abilities would you like to see Torbjorn get with his rework? Let me know down in the comments. Also, don't forget to check out my Discord server. Follow me on Twitch and Twitter. The links for that stuff are down below. Thanks for watching. Remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault. Also, special thanks to all my Patreon supporters for helping to make this all possible. If you'd like to see what kind of cool rewards you can get for supporting the channel, check the links on screen and down below.